This week on Waxing the Porpoise, G-Baby and the usual suspect Steve take a casino floor detour and play with house money while reviewing the 1998 deep cut Croupier. Join us as we pick apart the film to see if it passes Steve's authenticity check, endure G-Baby lusting after a certain South African babe, and speculate as to whether Clive Owen is in fact playing an Amish man. Pay him. Pay that man his money. Let's wax this Salon Privé porpoise.
Chase, don't do that.
You see, we working on his brow chakra. We're just in back of the crown chakra.
All right, let's get sour on some krauts. All right, so welcome to Waxing the Porpoise. We're here back again. I think, is this episode 33 now? I believe it is.
Ooh, putting me on the spot. I'm not positive. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it is.
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay. Yeah, these past couple of weeks just fucking ran together for me, but we had I should have double checked on this, but we had grand plans of having our mutual friend Richard on to go over his life story in volumes. I'm sure it'll be, but he needs a little bit more time, so we had to come up with another audible this week. And Steve, you had mentioned something about like a gambling anecdote, or where was this? Did this start from, and how it attached to Croupier?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's Croupier or Croupier. I feel like they pronounced it several different ways.
They did both ways, and I told myself, I was like, okay, I'm going to go with Croupier because it sounds more refined. And of course, I just went right into the English Croupier.
I don't even remember how you said it or how I said it, but it's kind of a funny story how this movie came up. A former coworker of ours, Shimmy, I ran into him in town. There's this big city park in the city where I live. And so I was going around there and he was going around there, and I saw him, said hi, and he showed me his phone, and he was listening to our podcast while he was out like
Nice.
Walking his dog and his kid. He was just waxing his porpoise right there in public. And so we got to talking, and he recommended this movie. And ideally, I actually wanted to have him on to talk about it, but then we kind of had to pull this audible at the last second. So maybe we could have him on to talk about something else. But yeah, he was like, you've got to watch this movie, just kind of knowing stuff that I like. And he's listened to a bunch of the episodes. So yeah, it was just funny when he turned his phone. He's like, check it out, dude.
That's awesome. Hell yeah. Yeah, I saw he friended the show, show's
nice.
Instagram page. So I was like, oh, sweet. I didn't know he was still in town. I thought he had moved to like Seattle or something. But any hoodles. Yeah, thanks, Shimmy, for the recommendation. Because yeah, we were kind of like, shit, what should we do? We gotta grab something quick because we gotta record. And this is one too. I've seen it, talked about, and I think this is kind of Clive Owen's claim to fame, or at least one of his earlier roles that was that got him noticed. And so I just knew it from that, and that the movie itself was good, and had wanted to check it out, but just never had. I didn't even know what the fucking term croupier meant, and I didn't know that it was so like it takes place within the casino and that kind of like subculture in the world. So if I would have known that, I would have jumped on that too, given your perspective too. So I feel like this one's going to kind of be like a hybrid episode, kind of like talking about that, and then wanting to pick your brain on like, how does this jive with what you've seen in like the professional or the advantage kind of perspective you have. Before we get going, you got myself tonight, Jim G Baby.
G-Funk.
And of course we have, as always, the usual suspect, Steve.
You
You ungrateful he bitch.
How's
One
it going,
time,
man?
I dropped a cigar ash on Antoine's carpet. He made me pick it up with my anus.
Yes. Set
Don't
him
make
up,
me-
knock him down.
Don't make me he bitch man slap you. Hello. Just circling back for one quick story that about our mutual friend Shimmy, which always makes me laugh. And I think it was so funny that I temporarily had blacked it out of my mind because I was reminded of it later, and I had no memory of it until the story was told more fully. And I'm like, oh my God, yeah, I remember that. So me and my buddy Josh went out to play golf one day just as a twosome. And for those that are unfamiliar, they'll usually send you out in groups of 4. So if you go out with 2, sometimes they'll pair you with another random 2 people. Not a big deal. It happens all the time. So Josh and I went out to play golf. They paired us with 2 other guys. And when I looked over, I realized, oh, that's our buddy Shimmy and his friend, who I didn't know who he was. His friend was kind of a douche, to be honest, like giving unsolicited golf advice in the middle of a round, which is kind of like a no-no. And Josh could tell that, because I try to keep it pretty cool. Like, I don't usually blow up on people, but he could tell, because he knows me really well, that I was getting a little more agitated. So we're playing this round of golf, and we get to the 17th hole out of 18, and I hit my drive off the fairway to the right, so I just need to like hit it back into the fairway. And this guy, this friend of Shimmy, decided that in the middle of the golf course was a great place to stop and just take a piss. It's not like on the perimeter of a golf course there might be woods where you could just kind of like scurry over and take a piss. This was like in the middle of the golf course. There's like a tree, and he just sidles up to it and starts pissing. And so I'm over on the right side of the off the fairway. I hit the ball, and it is a fucking missile, and it is heading right for him. And it's like the Mitch Hedberg joke where he's like, I was going to say 4, but I was too busy mumbling, there's no way it's going to hit that guy. And so like I'm just watching this absolute nuke go right towards him. And so it was either me or Josh or Shimmy yelled like, hey, heads up or whatever. But this guy was mid-piss with his pants like around his thighs. So all he could do is just slightly bend forward, and this ball drilled him square in the back. He was a good sport about it. He just laughed, and the other 3 of us were just dying laughing. Like, that's the most inopportune time to be like, hey, look out. He couldn't move, otherwise he just would have pissed all over himself, and he just he took it square in the back.
In the spine.
Dude, just off to the side, and I felt like it was deserved. So yeah, so funny to like the picture of that. I don't know how I forgot about it for a year, but then Josh was like, remember when you hit that guy in the back? I'm like, what? No, I have no memory of that at all. And then he told me the story. I'm like, oh yes, I do remember that. Sorry to derail. Get the fuck back! Sorry to derail as always, but
no, that's good. Life finds a way.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, glad to hear Shimmy's a fan of the show, and yeah, shouts outs again too for recommending Croupier. So yeah, this is what we audibled to, and I had never seen this, as I alluded to. You had never seen this, Steve.
Never saw it, never heard of it, had never even heard that term.
Are you familiar with our main protagonist, Jack Manfred, played by Clive Owen?
Yes.
And are you a fan?
Yeah, I like him. I was trying to think other than Sin City.
Sin City, yeah.
I think that's probably the most prominent thing I can think of. And as this movie goes along with the kind of sort of dark internal dialogue thing, I was like, wow, this is actually kind of similar to Sin City in that way.
Yeah, like the split personality thing. Yeah, you could totally see why like someone would be like, even besides that fun nugget, but like just like his acting presence, I feel like too. I did like him a lot in Sin City as well. As what's his name, Dwight, I think.
I don't remember.
Whatever. Yeah, he's dope in Sin City. I like him a lot. Probably more than anything else I've seen him in is. Have you ever seen Children of Men?
No, I've heard good things, but I've never seen it.
Oh man, that would be a good one actually to cover on this one day because it's not talked about enough. I don't think. I think it just kind of got lost in the glut of like mid to late 2000s kind of films, and it just didn't. I don't think it's given enough. It's not associated with enough reverence. I don't think to match like what it did.
It's sort of dystopian future. People can't have kids anymore or something.
Yeah, yeah. There's
It's not like
no.
it's not like a bummer message movie, is it?
No, no, it doesn't get too. It's not proselytizing, and it's not like
What?
beating you. Is that how you say that word? What is that?
Proselytize?
Proselytize.
Yeah,
Okay.
you had it.
Okay. Yeah, it's not like it's not preaching. It's not beating you over the head with it. It's like to me, it like even as the years go by, it's to me it's becoming more and more prescient and like they were onto something because it seems like it's not one of these over the top dystopian things. It's like I could see that being realistic, like maybe besides the whole like there's no women left on the world and like people can't all of a sudden no one can bear a female child. That's the most sci-fi, but everything else like the way the world feels and like just like tensions like on a global scale. But yeah, that's a really good one.
It's the opposite of Jurassic Park.
Right. Life doesn't find a way.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. Speaking of words, gambling-related words that I've never heard of, I'm wondering if you have ever heard gamblers referred to as punters before.
No, and this was on my notes too to ask you. I was wondering if you heard it.
Yeah.
I had never heard that term before.
It's funny.
So that's one that transcends like borders.
Yes, and
okay.
I think it's like the word cunt, where it's so like when it's used in the context I'm familiar with it, it's used in a pretty derogatory way. Like this guy's just out here punting his fucking money away, Whereas in this movie, it's sort of like,
Mr. Son of a Beach, let's play some cards.
Almost an endearing term for just gambler, where I give it more of a connotation of degenerate gambler, idiot, just somebody who's willingly just giving their money away for no reason at all. So yeah,
Gotcha.
that was funny. I didn't realize that was a pretty universal term. I kind of thought that was more like an inside term that just like advantage player people use to refer to regular gamblers. There's another term that I hear card counters use, which it just makes my skin crawl because it sounds so dumb. And it's a ploppy. It's people who just like plop down and give them, but it just sounds so dumb. I've never liked using.
Yeah.
I've never used it, but oh yeah, check out fucking ploppies over here. It just sounds so childish.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple things. Since we're on the topic of terminology, I meant to fucking look this up. But at the beginning, when they're giving our friend Jack, who again is played by Clive Owen, they're giving him the tour around, and then he asks like the casino manager, "Do you have a Salon Privé?" Do you know what that is, or did you look it up?
Yeah.
What the fuck is that? Like a high roller area?
Yeah, it's like a high limit. It's like a VIP section.
Gotcha. I should have inferred that.
I've only ever heard that in relation to foreign casinos, right?
Gotcha.
Obviously, because it's like a French term. But yeah, in the States, it would be like a high limit room or like a VIP, whatever. But yeah.
So like I'm picturing like Monaco or something, and
exactly.
Their Salon Privé is like this fucking like
Monte Carlo,
crazy,
super high minimums.
Okay.
You probably have your own waiter or server or whatever. One thing I know that if any card counter was watching this movie, they would be a huge fan of is the fact that tipping is not allowed in these casinos, because that's one of the biggest frustrations if you're any gambler really, but especially if you're a card counter or advantage player of any kind, are these fucking dealers who are just tip hustlers, and they'll go from being super nice and friendly to super dickheaded if you're not tipping them all the time. So to actually not be able to tip them would be such a dream.
So in the States, that's a thing. Like you can, they
Oh,
do accept tips.
yeah,
So
you
is it just
can.
the UK that
I
is like that?
guess I don't even know
Weird.
if that's accurate still, or if it was then, or what. But it's smart because one of the things we can get into, unrelated to the movie, is this idea of collusion between a player and a dealer. So
Hmm.
I guess we could just get into this thing real quick because there's a clear distinction between what is completely lawful or legal or conforming to the rules, which would be like advantage play opportunities. Then there's straight up cheating, and then
Hmm.
there's a gray area in between, which people usually refer to like angle shooting or playing an angle. So, for example, perfectly legal advantage play opportunities are like counting cards, or if a dealer accidentally shows you their face down card, you're using the information that anybody else at the table has access to. You're not cheating in any way. You're only using
Right.
your mind to gain an advantage over the casino. Cheating, like black and white cheating, would be in this case the guy who adds chips to the roulette board
Right.
after or after the result of a hand happens. You either pinch money off your stack or you cap money onto your stack if you won or lost, obviously.
Right.
That's straight up cheating. You'll get arrested, no question about it. There's a weird gray area in between called angle shooting, where like let's say you have a 16 versus dealer 10, and you make like a hit signal, and they give you a hand and you bust it, and you say, oh no, I didn't want a card. I was just like I was just kind of fidgeting my hand. It's not cheating. It's not cheating
Oh,
per se, and they'll usually give you one of those. They'll say,
yeah. So
okay,
that's like a
fine.
mulligan. You can't. That's not something that you can
But if you
like
get a
exploit.
reputation for that, you're not going to last very long. And like the roulette example in the movie where the guy he straight up cheats by putting the bet too late.
Right.
They let him, like, okay, we're going to pay you on this one, but you can't come back here anymore. I've seen a lot of people do it on insurance at blackjack, which if you're unfamiliar, when a dealer's showing an ace, they'll offer insurance to the table where you can put up half your bet. If the dealer has blackjack, you get paid 2-1, so you get your money back. Blah blah blah. If you're interested, you already know. So, but almost nobody ever takes insurance. So it's usually just a quick formality for the dealer. They'll be like, insurance open, insurance closed. And then they'll check. And then if they have a face card underneath or a 10, they'll flip it over. And sometimes you'll see people like, wait, I was going to get insurance. And the dealer's like, well, you've been sitting here for 11 hours in a row, and I haven't seen you take insurance one time, and you don't even know how to play properly. So I find that highly unlikely. So then they'll call the
Right.
pit boss over, and the pit boss will usually be like, okay, fine, I believe you that you wanted to buy insurance. If they don't go to the camera and see like, oh, you didn't, whatever. Um, so that's the kind of gray area in between, which we call angle shooting, where it's like you're not really breaking the rules, but you're walking a fine fucking line by
Hmm.
trying to manipulate the casino into allowing you to get away with something. Then
Those
on a
methods don't even seem like they'd be worth it. Like even
no,
trying.
it no, and it's a very very short term thing
Yeah.
that will burn your ass long term.
Yeah.
So in a similar vein is, so to circle back to the tipping dealers and why it's a good thing that they're not allowed to, is this idea of collusion, where in an industry like dealers where they're so tip reliant, there's an incentive for them to potentially cheat for the player,
Right.
right? They don't give a shit about the casino, because the more the player wins, the more likely they are to get tips. If a guy sits down with 10 grand and the dealer completely clears him out, that person's not going to tip him his last $10 as he walks away from the table. So
Yeah.
the dealers usually want the players to win because it's more likely to result in a tip for them. So there's this temptation with dealers to maybe allow players to get away with maybe seeing information they shouldn't, or like in the old days, you would manually peek underneath an ace to see if you have a blackjack or not, and there are tells that you can covertly give the player if it's a good card or a bad card, if it's not a face card, right? So this idea of players colluding with dealers is really dangerous, because sometimes dealers will do it without you prompting them at all, because you can see players that are like, oh, are you feeling lucky, or anything good under there, or you'll see them trying to fish for information or offer to tip for whatever. But then every once in a while you'll see a dealer who will they'll do something proactively that they're doing to help you in an effort to get a tip back. And if that ever happens, get up and walk away, because if the casino catches on to what you're doing, they won't know that you are an innocent party who just happens to be sitting there. They're going to think you're in on it. So all that is a long way of saying I think it's a good thing when dealers aren't allowed to take tips, not only because I hate tipping, but it disincentivizes them from potentially cheating.
Right.
Then again, just to give a quick devil's advocate on the other side, if dealers are incentivized by players winning, then they're going to want the players to win, and they're going to be happier about it. Whereas I've found a lot of dealers that are like Clive Owen in this movie, who genuinely get joy out of watching people lose. They don't give a fuck about tips.
Right.
They're shitty people, so they're probably not getting a lot of money in tips. So they love it. They love watching players bust out and then leave. And they'll even say smart ass shit to them when somebody loses all their money and gets up and leaves. They'll be like, "Thanks for playing," or just have some smart ass little comment. Those are the types of dealers I want to go over the fucking table at and get sideways on someone.
The Widowmaker. Changing 500. Yeah, that's interesting that you brought that up, because I was like, yeah, this is like the total flip side of like a rounders, or like, taking it from the he's not playing it so much like one of these hero, to me at least, not like he's not like a hero dealer or on the side of the casino. He's just like, he's found, like, because before he gets back into this working as a croupier, it's almost like he's been clean, like from drinking or drugs or something, and he's brought back into this world. But it's not anything like he's not like joining a gang or he's doing this one last score. It's he's going back to work an honest job at a casino being a dealer. And then once he actually starts doing it, he comes back from his first shift and he's like shaking, and he's talking about, he talks about how much I enjoy seeing people lose. So that's like the flips, the dark side of, the upstanding, person that's not cheating, that's going into his job and he's being a professional, but on the inside, that like kind of like sociopath or psychopath aspect of him, is deriving pleasure from it, just the same way like someone gets a rush from winning a hand, like risking big and it coming back for them positively. I thought that was an interesting yin and yang to this.
Yeah, so I originally had thought, okay, this guy is an ex-gambler going back into the industry on the other side, but
oh yeah, good point.
But as the movie went on, I did not think that anymore. Because, well, I'm sure you've heard the expression card shark before.
Yeah, and they use sharp in this.
Yeah, so I don't know if many people have heard that expression card sharp. And as the movie went on, and most decidedly when he rigs that home game that they're playing, I think his past was of a mechanic, which is a term used to describe a cheating dealer, which at the very end, he sort of winks at the camera and is like, well, now I'm just back to fucking being a cheating dealer and not giving a fuck about it.
They hinted that too, because his dad's a shyster, so he probably was brought. His dad showed him all those tricks, and that's a good point.
The last part where the ball lands on the green 0 on the roulette wheel, and he just clears everybody else's bets. Like, whoops,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah. He got so much joy out of that.
Yeah, if there's, I meant to look this up because I couldn't remember the guy's name, but there are some really impressive mechanics out there, which, like I said, there are people who can do things with decks of cards that you wouldn't believe. Like,
Yeah.
and one of them, this guy has been doing it for years. He's blind, so he'll take a deck of cards, and for example, he'll like hand it to you and be like, shuffle it up however you want, okay, and then give it back to me. And he's fucking blind, so he's just kind of doing the Stevie Wonder, like looking all around the room. And so he's like shuffling it, and he's like, okay, what game do you want this to be? Hold'em or whatever. So the volunteer, and this is a real volunteer. He's done this in public a million times, but this one I think happened to be at like an MIT college course. And he's like, oh, so you want to do Hold'em? Okay. How many players do you want there to be at the table? 4? Okay, fine. Which position do you want to be sitting at? 3? Great. And so then he'll deal the game just like he's dealing a normal game. And that person will get like pocket aces and then like ace, ace, king on the flop. And, he can rig these games seemingly impossibly. And he's fucking blind. His name is Richard something. And there was a documentary. Oh, God, I can't remember
That sounds
the guy's
nuts.
name. Yeah. So, but an interesting part about this guy's past is, I mean, it's kind of just like a recreational hobby for him. Like, hey, check out this cool shit I can do.
Right.
I can't remember who it was. It was like the Sultan of Brunei or, some huge head of state overseas sat in on like a demonstration just to see what he could do. And I'm sure I'll get the details wrong, but this guy was like, I will give you $1 billion if you come back home with me and deal at my casino, because this guy he's essentially an ATM, right? He can rig every single game
Right.
to where, and yeah, he says he never took anybody up on these offers, but you could see where that would be such a valuable skill to have.
Yeah. Speaking of this guy, I'm sure you're familiar with Ricky Jay. Rest in peace.
Ricky Jay?
Yeah, he's a magician. I think he's like an old school style magician. I think he died a few years ago. I think if you saw him, you'd be like, oh, this guy. But he does some insane shit with cards, like dealing. Like there's this one trick that he does. It's like 5 minutes long. And I don't know what the name of the game is, but like he has a full deck and he shuffles it, does all this crazy shit, and then he has it all in his hand and he lines them out. He goes like ace to king in every suit all in a row, but in between all that he's doing all this weird cardistry shit that's I'm like, every time I watch it like blows my mind. It's like he does a bunch of cool shit like that this blind guy does, like just having like an impossible sense or like feel like, or he's done this so many times, maybe like each card he just knows where it's at, like in the deck, and he's just so comfortable with all these moves and all the different variations. That shit blows my mind, like even before you get to like David Blaine level stuff, but just like the real tactile, like craftsmanship, like mastery of a skill of a thing, just with 52 cards. Like some of that shit is wild. Like super, like there's got to be such an intense amount of like memorization and like math and all those things all rolled up into one. It just I can't wrap my head around it. But
so the guy's name, before I forget, I just had to look it up real quick, so I guess I wouldn't be forgetting it. His name's Richard Turner. He had a documentary back in 2017. It's called Dealt, and I think he does like motivational speaking, sort of mixed with demonstrations of all the crazy shit he can do. So if anybody's interested, crazy guy, very cool story. And like he talks about, he can pick up a deck of cards, split it in half and feel it and be like, 24, like 24 cards, you know, like the feel, like the tactile, like you're talking about, of knowing
Yeah.
exactly how many cards are in each hand. And also when you shuffle them, knowing exactly that you're going one of each side every one. So
Yeah.
like there are guys out there who can do shuffle tracking, and that skill is unfathomable to me, how they can
Yeah.
keep track of stuff.
And keep it that precise every time they're
Yeah.
moving the cards around in their hand. Yeah, it seems like so ridiculous. Like it's so the margin for error is so fucking tiny, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
you have to be like on perfect every time.
Yeah.
Okay, actually, I wanted to get into this movie a little bit and try and tie back questions to this and bring it in because I think we're going in on almost 35 minutes. So just to get like what the story is out of the way, because I think there is some really interesting things going on in this film, and so just a real quick baseline, and and then we can kind of just potpourri around it. But so we center on Clive Owen, who in a past life he was like maybe one of these mechanic people. He's just like he knows how to deal cards like any game, like looks like roulette, blackjack is his strong suit. He's a down and out or aspiring writer is what he really wants to do, but he's kind of floundering. So his pops actually hits him up and is like, "I got you a line on a job being a croupier," which that part was interesting too because that part with the dad also made me think of Deuce Bigelow when the dad's like. It shows him talking on the phone. He's like, "Hey, I got you this job lined up. I know the boss. Go here. Go check it out." And he's wearing, just like, a button up and some slacks, and it looks like he's taking a call from like a nice resort or something, like he owns the place. He's like, "Yeah, I just started a new business." And then when he gets off the phone, it shows the dad walk around, and then he puts on his service coat, and he's a bartender. And he's like, "What would you like, miss?" It reminded me of that part in Deuce Bigelow when the dad comes to the dinner table to see Rob Schneider and his date, and it seems like he like owns the place, or he's like the head chef or something. And then the maitre d comes over. He's like, "Hey man, someone blew up the fucking toilet. Really disgusting shit show in there." And it turns out, yeah, his dad's just like a lowly janitor at this super ritzy place where he has to wear like a tuxedo.
I'm up to my ankles in human shit.
Yeah.
Dude, and then when they go in there to give him his little birthday cake, and he's plunging the toilet, and then he stops to take like a fingerful of cake barehanded.
Yeah. He's like, "Oh, raspberry babinka.
Yep.
This is my favorite."
Dude, that movie's so good.
Yeah, I thought that was a fun little tie back. Okay, cool. Bumps aren't working again. You fucking asshole. Son of a bitch, these dolphins. Where was I at?
Origin unknown, father of also unknown origin.
Yes. They do allude to this guy. He's either South Africa, or yeah, he is. He grew up in South Africa. So he's got kind of like a funky accent thing going on. I don't know if he really nails the South African accent, but anyway, so he gets into this casino world, and he's got this quasi weird relationship with his like live-in girlfriend, and then the casino shit starts, like we alluded to, it starts kind of taking over his life. Like he gets a taste for it again. And then there's this wild card femme fatale, Yanni, who comes into the picture, and things kind of start spiraling into like, does he go along with like a kind of a heist deal where he's kind of sitting on the sidelines. He just has to do his job, make sure this heist goes off without a hitch in the background, but he doesn't have a lot of risk in that. Which that's kind of going off into a tangent. But anyway, he goes through with it. I don't know. I guess I'll just leave it there. That's kind of our skeleton framework of this film, and then we'll delve into it a little bit further. So one question I have to you right off the bat was, did you like this film
I
overall?
did. I liked it quite a bit. For a good portion of it, I was thinking this movie was creeping higher and higher on my gambling like favorite movie list. Sort of creepily sneaking up on Rounders, which I think is probably my favorite.
Hmm.
Um, I felt a little underwhelmed when everything was said and done because I thought the premise was so good that they could have done more with it. But
Yeah.
that being said, I did like it a lot. There was a lot about it I liked. There was only a few things that were I felt like unnecessarily confusing or just irrelevant. Uh, but I did enjoy his moral compass because he he sort of calls that dude out for cheating, and he's like, I really don't care, but if you get caught and they know that I know, I could lose my job. But then he doesn't drop the dime on the Asian guy who he says he knows is counting. So
Yeah, I thought that part was interesting too.
yeah, so he kept his goddamn mouth shut, which I appreciate. There was also prior to Yanni, crazy South African bitch who comes in, is
Dude, by
is
the
that
way, smoke show.
yeah?
In a
I'm
weird way. Something
yeah.
I think it's the curly hair and the lips and like I don't know, dude. She had something going on that like entranced me.
So I do have to admit one of my biggest judgmental things is I hate fucking curly hair. You could not name me one female on earth that has super curly hair like that I find attractive. It's just not my thing. I don't know what it is. It seems like a lot. Um, but there's the scene where the guy he busts for cheating and gets thrown out of the casino. He waits for him outside. They fight, and that Bella gal gives him a ride home. And then they have one of the weirdest fucking like initiating of love scene I've ever seen, where she's like, "Oh, your shoulder's
Yeah.
messed up," and then he just like pounces on her like a leopard.
Yeah.
Like that's what we call a high risk move. You have got to know she's going to be into it because you basically just threw her on the ground and got on top of her. And that was the first thing in the movie where I was like, "Whoa, what the fuck?" This sort of came out of nowhere, and
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that. It definitely it was rapey. It was a rapey move for sure. Um it reminded me kind of the weird robotic mechanical interaction between Harrison Ford and Sean Young in Blade Runner. He fucks a washing machine.
yeah, I
Do you
guess I
remember
just
that?
don't. No, not particularly.
In that episode you were like, yeah, he gets pretty handsy with Sean Young. He's like, this is happening.
Yeah, my brain, like a hard drive, probably as soon as that movie was over and after that episode was over, immediately marked that space available to be rewritten. Like I did not.
Defragged.
Yeah, I did not really need to retain that. But there was one of my favorite lines of dialogue is when Bella, for reasons unknown, gets fired. She seems to think it's Jack that dropped the dime on her. Not really sure why they didn't really explain anything else about that. But then she comes to his apartment, and I should have written down what her line was, but it was super funny. She's like, "Your boyfriend fucked me and smoked my weed, and then called the shop on me, or got me fired,
Yeah, and took
or
me to the
whatever."
shops.
Yeah, and he's like, "Thanks." Just that look on his face, like,
Yeah, it was like, he's like, no, I didn't.
yeah, I didn't,
I've never.
I didn't, I didn't do all three of those things. I only did two of them.
They use this.
Which two would make you least upset?
Yeah, they use that slang term again, and it's not. I guess it's just like dropping a dime on someone.
Yeah.
Like took them to the shops.
Yeah, his weird, ambiguously attractive girlfriend wife Marion uses that threat against him later. Like, "I'll shop you."
Yeah, it made me think of that. Remember, he used to play the streets.
Yeah.
That one line was like,
Oh yeah.
"Then I'll stop and go and get chips and drinks."
Yeah, you used to love that shit.
Good times.
One other fun one.
I did not like his girlfriend, the Marion character. I was pretty cold. She seemed like a real dead fish.
Yeah, I thought she was cute, but there was just something about like her character that just was sort of grating.
Yeah.
But the scene early on where the woman comes in and is playing roulette, and she puts even sized stacks on black and red.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody is unfamiliar, those bets pay 1-to-1. So if you put 100 on one and 100 on the other, that's a net even payout, unless the zero hits and then you lose both. But what they're alluding to is money laundering. So she comes in,
Right.
puts in $200 bet, wins one, loses the other, so they pay her out. It's an even money exchange, and then she goes and cashes in.
Right.
And I have seen stuff like that in the casino, and it's funny because the casinos know it's happening. They pretend like they care, but I think it's just because they have to report suspicious activity. But otherwise, they don't give a shit, because for that one hand where she came in to play, she's still gambling. So it's a customer for them. So I may have told this story on the card counting episode, but it was the most egregious example of this I've ever seen, where this guy came into a casino and it was a $5 minimum table, and he bought in for something crazy like $2,000, and he got $1,900 of that in black, which are $100 chips. So he's got 19 black chips, and then he gets $100 in red chips, which are $5 chips, which is the table minimum. He sits down and he bought in with all 20s, which took forever because they line out.
They got to count it all out.
Well, they line out 5 vertically, 5 20s, and then I think like 5 laterally. So what would that be? 500. So they lay out 520s on the table. They take the fraud pen. They go over every bill to make it's right. The pit boss has to confirm this amount. Then they scoop it all up, jam it into the drop box, and then they repeat the process until it gets up to his 2,000. He plays, and that process literally took 20 minutes for some god unknown reason. So he finally buys in. And it was me and one other person at the table, and we're just sitting there staring at him like, are you for real? Like, is this real life? You're really doing this right now? He plays 3 hands at $5 a hand, and then is like, all right, well, and gets up and walks straight to the cashier and cashes out his $2,005 or $1,995, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I look at the dealer, and I was like, do you know this guy? Like, is he a regular, or is he like just a whack job? She's like, I don't know him, but he's obviously just cleaning his money. Like, oh, okay, cool. And she's like, yeah, they'll follow him, or make a note of who he is. Like, oh, okay, cool. But
yeah, in this movie, it made it seem like that the manager was like maybe in on something, or like maybe he's getting a cut and he's letting it slide. This is like,
very well could be. I mean,
that's what the insinuation I got was, and he gives her this smile, like it's just like, like a courtesy thing, like she's in every other Thursday.
Yeah, and I would never be one to give somebody advice on how to money launder, but in a hypothetical situation, the problem with what this guy was doing was his human interaction, right? That dealer is now taking note of, whoa, this is unusual. What is this person doing? Maybe I'll decide to tell somebody, maybe I won't. They have these things in casinos that are called slot machines. So if one person wanted to, they could go in with $1,000 in cash, put 10 $100 bills into a slot machine that now shows up as $1,000 credit. Then they can hit, I don't want to play anymore. And then here comes a ticket for $1,000. You take that to the cage. All they see is the fucking ticket for $1,000.
Right.
They don't. So yeah, if one were so inclined, I mean, that would be the smarter way to do it. So it really does just go to show the people who get caught committing these crimes are usually the dumbest.
Right.
people committing these crimes, you know?
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, I mean, people that are successful at, grinding on that kind of shit, you don't hear about them for a reason.
yeah.
Makes sense.
Or
But
I was recently reminded of, there was that funny story. It was a zoo, I think in England somewhere, where this guy just built a toll booth in this public parking lot next to a London zoo. Does this ring a bell at all?
mm-mm.
So for this guy for like 20 years just sat in this toll booth taking parking fees at this public parking lot that was next to a zoo. And then just one day he took his millions of dollars and retired and just left. And somebody called the zoo and was like, "Hey, Bob's not here working the toll booth. What do we do?" And they're like, "Who the fuck is Bob? We don't have
Who's
a toll
Bob?
booth. We don't operate a toll booth." And yeah, I mean, what an enterprising young man.
So how was this on the order of like years?
Years.
That this guy
like,
was doing this?
I want to say like 20 years.
I can't fathom like something as big as a zoo in a bigger city and a lot that has like, I guess it's one of those things like it just makes sense. Like you drive by and like, oh yeah, there's a like.
Yeah.
How often would someone think to be like, hey, I wonder if this is lawful? Does he have the permits?
Right.
That's so wild that you could just, yep, going to work. I'll see you for dinner, honey. And he's like, I'm going to work my toll. Like
It's
that's
so
insane.
It's so brazen that you wouldn't even question it. Like, well, obviously this guy works for somebody. Nobody would just erect a toll booth in a random parking lot. But
That's like on a much smaller scale. That's like, going to a concert or like some kind of like venue and just like throwing on a hard hat and maybe a yellow vest or something that says event or security and walk in with like a clipboard and a fucking ladder.
Yep.
Probably 9 times out of 10. But yeah, that level of commitment for actually erecting something that's exists out in the world that you go and work at 8 hours a day for 20 years, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Fuck.
You could file that under like social engineering, which is kind of what you were talking about. Just convincing somebody just by like no normal person would just walk in here with a clipboard and a hard hat,
It's so far removed from what you would think first. You wouldn't even, it's like noticing an anthill. You might be like, oh, there's an anthill. And then you keep going. Or if you're sadistic, you stomp it out. But either way, it's like, it's so frivolous to you. That's awesome. Good for that guy. Fuck, man.
Could I tell you just one more quick card counting story that sort of made me think of? And I don't think I told this one already, but if I did, feel free to cut me off. But I'm almost positive I didn't. I was at a casino that was actually scanning IDs at the front door, which normally for me is like a no-go. And I was asking the guy because there are a lot of other casinos nearby that weren't doing that. I was like, what's going on? Like, why are you guys doing this? And I had talked to the security guard a bunch over the few days I was there, and he was a super nice guy. And so we got along. And after like the second or third day of just like shooting the shit with him a little bit, I was like, what's the deal with these scanners? Like, I don't see anybody else around here doing that. And he basically said, yeah, we got in a lot of trouble for allowing minors to come in here and get blackout drunk. And it was a big problem. Now we have to sort of overcompensate and do this deal. So the last day I was there, maybe the last 2 days, he didn't scan my ID because he's like, oh yeah, it's you. I know you, come on in, whatever.
Right.
And so I was playing at a table, and I had been playing at this casino every day for a week and just no attention at all, no problem. And I was camping. It's what you pray for if you're a card counter. It's just a place that seems rather clueless and not very busy, and the game was pretty good. So I'm sitting there playing, and I hear the guy come up behind me, and he's like, "Hey, Steve, got to talk to you." And I was like, "Fuck!" It finally came.
Yeah.
And I look up, and the dealer's like, "Yeah, what's up?" And his name tag says Steve, and I'm like, oh, "Yes, it's not over." And then he the pit boss looks at me. He's like, no, I need to talk to you, Steve. And I'm like, fuck. So I went from super bummed to glimmer of hope back to like, oh, fuck. So he pulls me away from the table. Super nice guy, tells me whatever, goes through the spiel. And so I asked him, like,
invite you not to play anymore.
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and invite you to get the fuck out.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, yeah, no problem. You guys are cool. Are they going to give me any problems at the cage? Which is kind of my go-to question, because if he says no and they give me problems, I can go get him to be like, tell these fucking dipshits who make $9 an hour to just give me the goddamn money. You have no legal standing to withhold it from me, so just do it. Anyway, so he's like, oh, no problem at all. So I go over to the cage, and they're like, we're not going to cash out this much money without your driver's license. And I was like, all right, be right back. And so I went and got Bill, or whatever his name was. And I was like, hey, you said they wouldn't give me any trouble at the cage. They're not cashing me out, and I know I don't have to provide my ID, so I need you to come over there and help me. And he's like, just give him your ID. We know who you are already. And in my mind, I'm like, they haven't scanned my ID for like 2 days. They might know my first name, but how do they know? I don't think they know my name. So he's like, we already know who you are. Just give me your ID. It's not a big deal. We don't like, I asked him if they share information with anybody in town, and he said no. So I was like, what's my last name? And so he's like, and he pulls out this Post-it out of his pocket. And without saying what my actual last name is, he said a name that was very, very, very close. So like if your last name is Kwanzaa, he pulled out this Post-it and was like, I don't know, Kwanzaa? I'm like, fuck. All right, well.
Yeah.
So
you got me.
Yeah, pretty much like, all right, well, I'll be off then. So yeah. Gave him my ID, and everything was fine. But that first little like, Steve, I'm like, oh yes, no, fuck.
Yeah, the herky jerk, grinding gears.
Yeah,
damn it. Yeah, that sucks. Okay, so back to the croupier. I think they'll come a couple more anecdote pieces as we work through this, because I'm curious what your opinion was. But another thing I thought that foreshadowed to this guy's Clive Owen's like proclivities of like, getting joy out of seeing people lose. I thought it when he's like getting ready, because at the beginning he has this weird blonde hair, so it's like a little mini montage. He's getting his hair cut, he's getting his hair dyed, he's getting ready to like put on his suit and go out and deal. It was weird. I can't remember the first one, like someone asks what he does, or
oh yeah,
but the second one, like he's got, now his hair is black and they're like trimming him up, shaving him, and the gal was like, she's like, what's your line of work? What do you do? What do you do for a living, love? He's like, I'm an undertaker. Yeah. And he has this really wry smile. And then later on, it's like, kind of like the Widowmaker. Like, he's like, yeah, I'm fucking taking these people out, like dealing like a badass, But what did you think about the scene when the manager of the casino's like kind of like testing him to see if he can pass muster? Yeah. And he's telling him, count this many chips by sight, like that quick. And he's like 1,800 or whatever. I was like, damn, that's fucking wild. Like the thin chips and like having that kind of awareness. But then he's like, and he's like dealing, and he's like, what's the count? And he's all -9. He's like, I got -8. And like, so he is that like going to show that the
way off
the deal? He was?
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless they're using some bizarre ass count. The one I had was -1. And I rewound it again to make sure I didn't miss anything. But
so does that mean that like at a certain level they want the dealer to be counting along, like counting cards along while they're playing, keeping everything together, so they can try to pinpoint if someone else is counting too? Or
I mean, in a perfect world, yeah, you would love that, but I've probably come across, I would say it's far below 0.1% of dealers that I think can count and deal at the same time. I think it was
Seems
just,
super hard.
oh God. I mean, if you wanted to, you could do it because you're dealing, practicing all day, every day.
Right.
Like you could do it because you kind of just go into autopilot, but most dealers don't. They just don't care.
Yeah.
And
But wouldn't it be
I think it was more like a testing question, because I bet most dealers, if you're training them, maybe he could just tell how skilled he was by the way he was dealing, and when he just decided to ask him like, "What do you have the count at?" or whatever. I could see a lot of dealers being like, "What are you talking about? 15?"
Gotcha.
Thinking he's talking about the cards, but
Like how many cards he's dealt? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. And it seemed too, I was like, well fuck, yeah, wouldn't that be like your ideal countermeasure to something
hmm
like that? But then it's like extrapolated on all the other variables and everything else that the dealer has to keep straight in his head, he or
yeah,
she's head. But then I was thinking, like, yeah, why would they do that? They probably don't get paid very well.
hmm
But that would be a situation, like what if you have like a VIP dealer, or you have your like top shelf, and you pay them more to be of a higher caliber. It seems like that that investment would be worth it, to have like this upper echelon that you would reserve for certain situations, or
hmm
table limits or something. That seemed like, looking on the other side of the gate, it seems like that would be a really good countermeasure to
yeah.
have.
I mean, if I owned a casino, I would absolutely want my dealers to be able to know how to count.
Yeah,
I mean,
that seems
unless
crazy.
it takes so much of their concentration that they start making like payout errors or protocol errors, or something like that, because it can be tough when you're first starting. But
I bet there's a lot of burnout associated with that too. So maybe even
yeah,
if it was a good return on your investment, then you'd have to factor in like turnover. And
well,
anyway, that's
and
definitely getting off into a side tangent.
the fucking customer base is awful, dude. Like customer service jobs are rough
In
normally,
general, yeah,
but in a casino, man, the amount of abuse these people take, I
yeah, I can
wasn't
imagine.
I wasn't prepared for it. I mean, it it's stupid. Like these people come in there willingly giving their money away, and then they're pissed off at the dealer who's just standing there like, I'm doing my fucking job. Nobody's forcing you to be here.
Yeah, I just work here, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of really stupid, irrational people. So
Well,
yeah,
you
that's
know
something
that
I
part
wouldn't think of.
in Casino where Joe Pesci's losing, he's like 14 fucking paints in a row, and he's like throwing the cards at the dealer and like just being a total
Yeah,
asshole.
yeah, super abusive. Give me a
And
fucking marker.
yeah, I haven't seen anything quite that bad, but close for sure.
Um. Okay, so I got you touched on it too a little bit, and getting in kind of the psychological aspect of this movie, because I think it is kind of heady, a film. And the the most interesting part to me is like when, because our main guy Clive Owen, he's a writer, and then he's like, I don't know if he has writer's block or he's just not writing, and he's fallen to this world of casino, work, being a croupier. But then at some point he's like, this would make a good story, like all the intrigue and kind of, and like he talks about like wanting to be, a writer and peer into and insert himself into other people's imaginations and these kinds of things. And he's like this ultimate voyeur, like looking around, observing people at the casino, all these habits, and so he comes up with the bright idea of like writing himself as, someone else with a different name into his book. And it parallels the rest of the movie. So he calls out like chapter 3 this, and
hmm
like, and it grows as the movie goes along, and it ties up pretty nicely too with him like finishing his book. But I thought it was interesting like how he breaks down, and that like he calls his character, who is him, as Jake.
Yeah,
And even his girlfriend at the time, she's like reading some of his work. He's like, "Why don't you just come out and say it? It's like Jake." He's like, "That's not really
yeah,
a stretch. It's like this. So this is how you really think. You're just like this fucking like, you know,
yeah.
like super like down on the human race, like despondent, like this is what you think of people. And I thought it was interesting to see how like that splitting of the mind, you know, and how he's like two different people. And he's like, on one hand, and he even says it too when the girlfriend Marion, she's like, oh, I love you. And then the narrator part comes in. He's like, and I only half loved her, and she knew that. And like, I like that dynamic of using the narrator as kind of like his other self, his real self, some would say, and how they interspersed it throughout the film. I really like that a lot.
I did too.
This kind of like struggle. I don't know if struggle is the right word, but because I think he knows that, rightfully so, like, because right when he gets back into being a croupier, it's like this it's an addiction kind of thing. It's like an addictive thing about his personality. He knows that, and he's getting into it, like seeing people lose. He comes out and says that, like, he derives joy from that. And I thought one point of levity too, that fucko Matt, who he's buddies with, or he pals around with at the beginning, who's a fellow dealer, who's like clearly like skimming off the top, and he's just a slimeball dealer. But they're talking about something at like one of these after parties, and our guy Jack, he quotes Hemingway because he's a writer to him.
Yeah.
And he's all, the world breaks everyone, and afterwards some are strong at the broken parts. He's like, that's Hemingway. And then that dude Matt's all, wasn't he the dude that shot himself?
Yeah.
And there's a quick like little glance where like Clive Owen's like, yeah, he did. Like,
Yeah.
he fucking walks off. Like, that part gave me a nice chuckle.
That was a great line and a great comeback. It's like, oh, you mean the guy who killed himself is talking about like strength and mental resilience? That's funny.
Yeah. So I guess, so he's doing this, and like there's that weird part with that Bella gal, and they fuck in blood. Like he's all bloody, and she's like fucking making out with her like hardcore, and they get in this really weird fuck session covered in blood. She looks traumatized too, like sitting up in the bed, having a cigarette, passing him the smoke, and it made me feel kind of dirty.
She was a weird character. I don't know if it was just visually or what, but even at the beginning when they're just in the same little changing room and she goes tits out for Harambe without knowing who this guy is right next to her like, okay, this chick's a little nutty for sure.
I thought that too, and then I was like, well, I know people in Europe and shit, you know, that's more old world, and they have way less hangups about our puritanical based, you know, like U.S. Like that's just not allowed, you know.
Is it
not
true
allowed?
French girls don't shave their pits?
Some don't, but they got new beaches.
Not in the winter.
Yeah, I thought that, I was like, yeah, European style.
Yeah, that's a fair point I hadn't thought about, because when I was in the shithole dump city of Paris briefly, they had like tits on newspapers, like on the front page.
That's awesome.
Like, wow.
Don't they do that? Isn't that Canada as well? They have like nude, like the weather women on like some channels, or is that a different country? They come out just like in like a skirt and just tits out, and they're given the weather. Like,
I don't recognize the existence of Canada, so I'm not sure. But
okay.
No, I don't.
Or is that just my dream from last night?
I don't know. I think that's just your Pornhub browsing history.
Weather women got a strong front coming up from the southeast.
You do like weather.
And then our gal Yanni, is that what her name is? Yanni?
Yeah.
She goes tits out later on, and that scene, I was like, okay, so we're fucking right now, for sure.
Yeah,
and it doesn't happen. I was like, dude, this guy's like, he's got some mental fortitude or something, dude. I would have eaten her asshole that night for sure. She's so fine, and she's just got tits out, and they're just sleeping in bed. And he's like, good night, and he rolls over and turns out the light. No way.
Yeah, well, I think he might have thought something was up because when she's telling him about like her backers or whatever who are planning this robbery, he's like, "Did they tell you to sleep with me?" Like he was kind of suspicious of her motives, maybe.
Yeah.
Um, and that was kind of one of my probably my biggest. I wouldn't even say critique or complaint about the movie, but the the robbery of the casino is kind of like the main thing, or it could be one of
Right.
them. But it was so short and unclear. Like I wasn't even sure what was happening.
Yeah, me too.
They could have made the robbery like the focal point of the entire movie and really kind of played it up. You know, like an Ocean's 11 type thing.
Yeah. That's
But
what I thought they were going to do. And it was really an afterthought.
yeah, the scene was like really quick and didn't know what the fuck was happening. And one other thing that bugged me was Marion. She hears the voicemail from Yanni, which if you're living with a woman and you're conspiring with another woman about a robbery, might
Yeah,
want to
here's my
tell her
landline.
not to leave a voicemail that's super cryptic, which apparently Marion was able to decipher from, hey, tomorrow it's on the 24th. She calls the cops and says, hey, I think they're going to rob the casino tomorrow night. Like, how the fuck do you make that connection? Did I miss something?
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't like that. I didn't really infer that that's what she had done either. But now that you say that, I mean, they were pretty like, they were on it like shit to a blanket
Well,
once
that
the shit popped off at the casino. Like,
the cop later is like, she called me and said that they were planning on robbing the
oh,
casino.
yeah. Okay, that's right. And that's another weird little side tangent because after Clive Owen fucks Bella,
Uh-huh.
or shortly thereafter, he's like he's coming out on the city streets and he just happens to see his old gal, Marion, who like seems real straight laced and like, professional woman and she's walking down the street making out with some dude like that looks like a businessman down this busy street. I was like, what the fuck is that? And I wasn't even sure until that dude was like, I loved her.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, oh, okay, that is the same dude. Because
I
why
felt
is he
like
coming in giving Clive Owen shit? Like,
I think they put that in there on purpose to be like, I'm the same guy from earlier in case you weren't sure.
yeah. Because I was like, all the way up until he said that, I was unsure. I was like, was that the same guy? Kind of
Hmm.
looked like him, but
Same here.
yeah.
Well,
I
and,
guess
and
that's a good point. She had like a direct line to the inside there.
well, and then they're like, Marion's dead. Like, what?
Yeah, that's the biggest part. I meant to go back and try and look and like, was that somehow related to like the botched? Was that like a reprisal for the botched robbery of the casino? But then at the
Well,
very end, it makes it seem like no, because everything went the way it was supposed to go. I guess
yeah, I'm
I
not
didn't. I
sure.
didn't like that uncertainty.
Yeah, I
And
don't
how
know.
like Clive Owen, I know he didn't like really love that chick, but there were points, where it shows he's conflicted. But yeah, then she's like she's dead. He's just like, okay,
Yeah,
tomorrow's Friday. Like he just
hit by a car. It could be revenge, and like, or it could be a drunk driver. Like, well, those are very very different. I thought it was weird when they're in the casino the night of the robbery and like leading up to the moment, they kept focusing on different people, which there were so many people they were focusing in on. I was like, who the fuck is this guy? Is this guy important? And then they would like go to somebody else and like, oh, this guy's part of it, and then it was over so fast. I'm like, I don't know what just happened, like who did what, or I didn't
yeah,
even know.
you see
I
a
didn't
cage come open, there's a gunshot, and then it's like over.
I didn't even know the robbery was unsuccessful until later. Like
Yeah.
that's how ambiguous it was to me. But
Yeah, the
yeah,
parties behind that heist are like it doesn't make sense. Because then there's also too um Clive Owen gets the $10,000 advance for participating
hmm
in this heist thing, and he wraps it up in tinfoil and wedges it between the oven or dishwasher
smart, very
in
smart.
in the flat. Uh, and his old lady Marion finds it, and then you don't know what happens with the 10 grand after that at all. There's nothing spoken about it.
Yeah.
But then it all turns up roses for our boy Clive Owen because, oh yeah, the book that he's been writing while he's going through this weird, like his time as being a croupier. He's like, oh yeah, I finished this and it's a bestseller. Now I'm rich and like, so everything's cool. It's like, fuck that $10,000, whatever happened to that. It's like, and then, so I guess we'll just get right into the end too. So like this shit goes down and then his old lady's dead and then life goes on. He writes a book. It's a bestseller. He's cool. He's wearing this really stupid fucking hat that makes him look, and he's got suspenders and a button up. I was like, is he Amish? What's going on here?
The Amish hat was bugging me the entire time.
Yeah, I did not like it at all. But then he gets a phone call from Yanni, who like she just fucking disappears. And she's all happy. She's in South Africa, and then boom, boom, boom. She hands the phone over to Clive Owen's dad from the beginning, who was actually like a mastermind. Like he was like, this is what my impression was. Like he was 10 steps ahead of everything. Like at the very outset of Clive Owen getting this job, like that, like he knew he had plans for this and inserting him in this position and playing this long game, the long con with with Yanni. But it didn't really, like you were saying, like it didn't really hit me like the way I wanted it to hit me. Like, oh wow, like it was just like, oh, that's kind of an interesting little turn, but it didn't have a lot of impact, I guess, for me. But I liked the journey overall, A to B, and like him kind of talking, narrating in his head, and kind of just going through all of these events. I don't know.
Yes.
It is an odd movie.
The style of it was really fucking cool. I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
There was just, I felt like the story was lacking a little bit, only because I felt like I said already, there was so much potential to make it super badass. I just felt like they came up a little bit short, but I definitely enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yeah, and another point at the beginning too, I made note of. It was like he's kind of philosophizing a little bit. He's talking about, you have to make a choice in life. You're either a gambler or a croupier. And like, I know it's not that black and white of like who you are in the world, but it's like, are you a cheat or do you play it straight? But then within that, it shows, like there's all kinds of shades of gray in between that too, because he's this croupier who he's wants to play it super straight. He rats out that dude, Matt, who's fucking skimming, gets him fired. But then, shit happens and
oh yeah, I guess they didn't show Matt getting fired, but yeah, because he went and told the boss.
Yeah, he thinks that Bella, because he sees him later on, that Matt guy. He's like, yeah, Bella took me to the shops or whatever. And see, okay, so this is my other question too. It's like, so at the very end, yeah, Clive Owen's dad's like, yeah, everything's great, we got the deal, or I don't know. That part's really weird. But then Clive Owen gets off the phone and then turns and then like hears footsteps coming up behind, and then it's like, oh, it's Bella, and it's like, okay, wait. I haven't had, I just watched this morning. You just watched this like a few hours before we recorded, but I was trying to think like, okay, well then was Clive Owen actually in the driver's seat of all this from the very beginning? Like he was on to his dad, like encouraging him to go back and get this croupier job. Like, oh, he's going to get me into something. And like, he had this Bella gal off the side the whole time.
I'm not following.
Well, it seems like, I don't know. I think the impression I got from...
I thought he just reunited with her after everything was said and done.
Yeah, part of me was thinking, oh, it's just that. Like, he just his girlfriend Marion's dead. That Yanni guy who gal seemed like he maybe was into. Like, he was intrigued by her for sure.
Yeah.
She's off the table, and was it just like, oh yeah, there's this Bella gal we fucked in blood, and she's pretty good in the sack. Like maybe like they're just together now. But part of me made me I was thinking there was more to it. I still can't wrap my head around it. Like, were they in on something too?
Was there any scene more unnecessary in this movie than the one where he meets the gal who's like, I'm a witch, and then they're driving together and he like grabs the wheel when she almost hits the pedestrian, and then there's like no more mention of her at all. Like, what the fuck was that? That was,
Yeah, I
it's
don't
like
know.
we're at 88 minutes and they're like, we need 3 more. We just got to add another scene in here.
Yeah, I don't know. The only thing I could tie that back to was when someone was talking about how good his hands were with dealing work, and he's like, the hands of a conjurer or a card sharp. Like, I don't know. Maybe they were trying to tie back into that. Maybe during his time in South Africa, like, he got into some shit. I don't know.
I did like the part where Yanni's like, are you into astrology? And he's like, absolutely fucking not. But I am a Gemini and we don't believe in astrology. I thought that
Yeah,
was pretty funny.
that was a good line. Yeah, yeah. I was most shocked when like they go to that dude's house for like the weekend or whatever, his chateau or whatever, and like she just walks in all nonchalant, like he's getting his jammies on, and she just strips, and she's got like a nice natural rack, but I was like, oh yeah, this shit's going down, and then she puts her pajamas on, and then they get into bed and they turn the other way. I was like, dude, no way, I would have ravaged that woman. She wanted it. Dude, she was so fine. Yeah, I don't know what it is about that tight curly hair and just like her whole like vibe.
Ugh.
I thought the other interesting part when it shows like Clive Owen's on tour, because like before she's like, oh, I got a black eye and like my fucking wrist is all fucked up, and then like the next day or like the next morning or something, he goes to like check in on her, and like the wrist bandage is gone and like her shiner is completely gone. He's like, yeah, that went away pretty quickly. Like, it was like blatantly like he's clearly onto you.
Yeah.
Which was even weirder. Why it's like, why would you go along with helping her then? Like, what is your thing about helping her if you're not trying to you're not trying to bone? You had perfect opportunity. Like, what is the draw to this person? That's why it made me think like maybe he had some inside shit via that Bella gal onto what she was doing, and then like maybe he had some intuition or an inkling about like his dad trying to set him up or putting him in this position. That's where it kind of like, that's what made me think that. Because too, like when Bella gets fired or whatever, it clearly, she thinks that like all that seemed like an act to me, because she thinks that Clive Owen ratted her out, did this and that when he didn't, and she comes and makes a show of it to his girlfriend, like, yeah, he fucked me, he smoked my weed, made me smoke weed, and then told and ratted me out. And then it later on it makes it seem like that Matt dude was like maybe like it's an act of revenge for him getting ratted out by Clive Owen, that he did something to her, or I don't know. That's a spiral, but
It's possible. I mean, yeah, I guess it's very possible. I didn't pick up on that at all, but
because otherwise, like at the very end, why would you show her? Like, why would you include that in the movie? Like, bring her back? Like unless they were trying to say something, or be like, oh, there's this. Why would you even include her? You just have Clive Owen like, oh yeah, your dad was behind this the whole fucking time, or he had
I
this
don't
weird thing
know.
going on.
May,
Click, roll credits.
Maybe it could be, and this is not, hopefully not going to be too like sniffing your own farts, but there was that moment where he was working the roulette table and that obvious degenerate gambler comes in who's like sweating, freaking out, trying to decide
Yeah,
what to gamble on, and he helps him, right? He scoots his chip over from what would
right.
have been a losing bet to a winning bet and pays him like, hey, here you go, buddy, I'm going to do you a solid. And then the guy walks away, and there's that internal monologue where he's like, and yep, nothing's going to change, because the guy turns around and comes back. And even though he was just given this gift, he's like, I'm going to gamble more. So
Yeah,
that might have tipped him over the edge of, I had a little faith in humanity left over, and that just destroyed the rest of it because the Bella gal she was like super cynical, like this place is a fucking shithole or cesspool or whatever she said. So maybe,
Cesspit.
yeah, maybe them getting together in the end was like, well, because in the right before that is when he does that sort of wink and the nod to the camera, like, "Yep, I just love fucking these players over,"
Yeah.
and then she's there too, like maybe that's trying to further the point of, yeah, now he has fully joined the camp of cynical asshole, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. That's a fair point too. I mean, that makes sense too. Um, yeah, I think that's about it on the Croupier. Uh, I liked it too. For the record, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I guess I should have asked what you thought.
Yeah, I alluded to it earlier. I think the payoff for me leaves me a little bit wanting, but as a whole, I like the journey. It feels like almost kind of like a film noir kind of aspects to it. I mean, you have the femme fatale in Yanni, who she's not like a true, like really, like there aren't really stakes there established. I didn't think, but she fits the bill for a femme fatale. Maybe a neo noir, as it were.
Stop speaking French.
Ah!
I looked up, I think it was IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes, and it was like, oh, it must have been Rotten Tomatoes because it was critic and audience. The critic score, I think, was 95, and the audience was 78. And I thought, like, that's pretty perfect. I could see why this would be a critical darling,
Darling.
like
Yeah.
stylistically or whatever. And I could also see where it would be a little bit lower for the dummies like me watching at home. One thing I will say,
I think high 70s for Rotten Tomato score for audience is still pretty good.
yeah. Well, on IMDb, it seems like everything is between a 7.1 and a 7.4. You know,
Yeah,
like,
it's very, very hard. It's like Shawshank. It's like you have to be Shank level to get into like high 8s, like 9s, like so.
I will make one quick recommendation if anybody's curious about this type of thing. There's a book out there. It's written by let's see, he used to work in a Vegas casino as a pit boss or like floor supervisor or shift manager or one of those ambiguous titles that you're not exactly sure what they do, but it's in like middle management, who became a card counter. And it's an interesting look at the duality of he used to work for the casino and now he works as a card counter. It's called The Blackjack Insiders, and it's written by a guy named Andy Ewell, which is Andrew, last name Ewell, Uyal. It's a good book. It's an easy read. I actually got to meet him in real life, and super nice guy. So
Huh.
if you're at all curious about the differences between going from one side of the table to the other, I would recommend that book. So
Yeah, that sounds super interesting. There was a book that dude Clive Owen checks out at the bookstore. I was wondering if that jumped out to you by John
Yeah.
Scarn.
yeah,
Is that a notable in that world as well?
yeah.
Scarn on cards.
Yeah, I think he was more of the mechanic type of guy.
Gotcha.
I could be wrong, but I think it is either like card manipulation or I could be wrong, but
Gotcha. All right. Yeah, there's not a ton of trivia on this movie. I think probably the most poignant is that both the gal who played Bella and Clive Owen, and the other background croupiers in the movie were actually trained by professional croupiers. I thought that was fun.
yeah, I could buy that. I don't even remember them showing Bella dealing.
Yeah, I think there was a couple scenes, but they were real brief. It was like he came and tapped on her shoulder. I was like, "New
Oh,
dealer."
yeah.
So yeah, it
Yeah.
wasn't extensive,
I mean,
but
he looked pretty slick with his dealing. Anybody,
uh,
if anybody is a recreational or professional or whatever blackjack player, you may notice that in Europe they deal a little bit differently, where they deal one card to each player, and then a dealer card, and then the second card to each player. But the dealer does not take a second card, which is unusual.
in
They,
blackjack, you're
huh?
talking.
Yeah, they refer to it as European No Hole Card, or ENHC, which changes the
Huh.
rules a little bit. And like there's one part where a player doubles an 11 against I think a 10, a dealer 10, and then when he does take his whole card, it's an ace for a blackjack, and he takes both bets. And as far as I understand, in no whole card blackjack, if you double down, you only lose your original bet, right? So that might be too far into the weeds, but I just thought that was interesting to maybe the casual blackjack player, that they notice, like, wait, what the fuck? The dealer only has one card, because they
It
don't
didn't.
deal
It
the
didn't
they
really
don't deal the
jump out to
second
me.
card until all the action for the players is completed.
Right. So does that? I guess my Philistine question would be: how does that change significantly? Like when if you'd be counting that game,
No,
it would
it
have to,
does.
right?
No, it wouldn't change if you're counting. It just changes the rules and the house edge a little bit, because like one of the big advantages you have as a card counter, big in quotes, is knowing when and when not to take insurance. So if the
Right.
dealer doesn't have a whole card, you don't have that opportunity, as far as I understand. I've never played in Europe, but if the dealer doesn't have a whole card, they're not going to be checking for blackjack before the action is completed. So
Yeah.
uh, it would change the action a little differently, but I don't know enough about the rules to say for sure. But
All right. Cool. Well, yeah, that'll do it for Croupier. I know this is kind of one this is one that surprisingly in its native UK where it was released, it got a really shitty reception and pretty much just bombed and didn't find an audience at all. I guess this was made in 1998, so that's what I'm running with, but it wasn't officially released. It was shelved until the year 2000, but the official release date is 98 because it went on some like cinema festival circuits and things like that. It was going to be nominated for an Academy Award, but it was shown on Dutch television somehow, um, like formally through a network, and so I guess that right there is like a strike against it. Like it couldn't have been released anywhere other than like a theater venue to be classified
what
or
if
nominated, but
what if the like film studio or producers had nothing to do with it? It seems kind of shitty to punish them if like a Dutch TV
they
company got all.
must have signed off on it.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Because
I
I
mean,
could
because
see
if
them
somebody
being
gets
like throwing up their hands, like, "Hey, I didn't," and appealing, like, "Hey, this was like pirated or bootlegged, and they threw it on." I could see them like the Academy, like understanding that and like giving them a pass. So my maybe not. Maybe it's just like, yeah, well, sorry, it happened, so fuck you. But I could see them being like official about it if it was like,
yeah,
well, yeah,
I
you
think
signed off, you let them fucking do it, so you broke the rules. Sorry.
I think you're right, because I mean, as far as I know, they send out screeners for movies that are eligible for Oscars and shit. So if you just
Right.
gave one to somebody in Belarus to put on TV, it's like, oh, now you're ineligible. Like, well, no, that's not exactly fair.
Yeah. Yeah. So they must have
Yeah, they must
been
have been
some kind
like,
of official.
let's see how it goes. I wonder if any of the main actors are. You said Belgium? Is that what you said?
Um, no, this was released in the UK.
No. Where the reason they got disqualified is because it was played on was it Belgium? Like
It
TV
said
station?
Dutch. It said Dutch TV. So what is that? That's
Okay.
Amsterdam,
Yeah.
Holland. Yeah, pretty sure. Yeah, disqualified from the Academy Awards after being shown on Dutch television. So, wow, wow, wow.
That episode of Friends where he's like, "Where do Dutch people come from? Is it the Netherlands?" It's like, "Nice try. That's where Captain Hook and Peter Pan are."
Damn, that's a deep cut. I saw one the other day that made me just fucking laugh when I can't remember what it was, but Ross gets up, he like realizes he's like, my fajitas, and he
Oh yeah, I'm fine. That's a good one. I'm gonna make margaritas.
yeah,
Or
oh my fajitas.
when he comes out holding the steaming or sizzling plate, and they're like, "Ross, you need pot holders." And he's like, "Oh, that's gonna hurt tomorrow."
Oh, poor guy. All right, so yeah, that was interesting. Let us know if has anyone ever seen Croupier. If not, I think that's a solid recommend from us. Check it out. Um, Shoot us an email about this or anything under the sun at waxingtheporpoise.com. Or you can check us out on either of our socials. Instagram is Waxing the Porpoise and Twitter at Waxing the Porp. Let's see. Next week.
Tell your friends.
Yeah. Yeah, leave us we've gotten some good reviews recently. Let's if you guys are so inclined, wherever you listen to your podcasts, leave us a rating or review. Tell us what you think. We appreciate all the positive feedback and all the love that's come our way thus far, and appreciate you. We do. I have a couple housekeeping notes. One of which is so teaser next week. We do have lockdown. We're going to be having Hydraberg, my buddy Nick from the A Cut Above horror review, and fellow fan of the Straight Chilling community. He will be on next week. We're going to be discussing another flick from 1998. Coincidentally, Fallen, starring our guy Denzel Washington. So I'll definitely have a banger Denzel devotional queued up for that one. Also starring Elias Koteas, aka Casey Jones from the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You may have recognized him from. He's also in the Thin Red Line.
Nope, no idea.
Okay. I think when you see him, you'd be like, "Oh yeah, it's this guy."
I may have seen the original Ninja Turtles when I was younger. Is that the let's see, what's the one with Bebop and Rocksteady? Is that the second one?
No, they have like stand-ins for those. They have fuck, what do they call them? Toka and Reza are in the second one. It's like the snapping turtle and like the wolf thing. They didn't. I don't think they had the rights, or they didn't want to use those side villains. They didn't come out with them until the fucking Michael Bay Abominations in the 2014. All the CGI Ninja Turtle shit. Like they did like they basically it was like Transformers Ninja Turtles.
Okay, so I'm a little bit confused because I remember I must have been 7 or 8. So what would that be, like 94 or 95, 93? Watching a Ninja Turtles movie with Bebop and Rocksteady that was live action. It wasn't animated.
I think you're thinking of Toka and Rezar that are in the second one, which came out in 92, maybe 93. They were basically stand-ins for Bebop and Rocksteady. No live
Okay.
action has had Bebop and Rocksteady in them.
Okay. That's one of my earliest childhood nightmares that I can remember. How fun.
of Bebop and Rocksteady.
Yeah, chasing me around my childhood home kitchen table.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, they didn't include them in the movies for whatever reason. I think it was maybe a rights thing, or maybe they just thought they were too buffoonish to include in the movie. But at any rate, John Goodman's also in Fallen. Have you ever seen Fallen? I don't think you have.
No, no.
Okay, it's kind of I would say it's horror adjacent, but it's more like a thriller crime with like some supernatural elements, like more along the lines of like Mothman prophecies,
Okay. Yeah.
kind of like on that wavelength. But yeah, it's an interesting one. It'll be fun. But yeah, join us next week. We'll have Heidelberg on. He'll have some. I'm sure he'll have some hot takes, some hot cakes, and oh, also quick little promo here. I was just recently on Straight Chilling. Is they're doing like a side venture called, I think it's called Creature Comforts, and so their main podcast, they specifically center on horror review, so horror films straight up. And one of the co-hosts, Justin Soju, has started doing. He did one with Heidelberg actually already with Marvel Disney's Werewolf by Night. So they're trying to get into like more horror adjacent, like action kind of properties, kind of all over the map, just not to be pigeonholed in like strictly horror reviews. And these won't be these are just video kind of mini episodes that run like an hour long, hour and a half, but that'll be releasing on their YouTube on, what is it, Monday, I believe. Yeah, Monday the 21st, it should be out on. You can find that at their YouTube, is youtube.com/at Straight Chilling Podcast. So yeah, I was fortunate enough to join them when we talked about Batman Returns from '92. It was a really fun discussion. I appreciate those guys, especially Justin, for having me on. I thought we had a really good discussion, so keep an eye out for that. By the time this releases, this episode, it'll already have been out for a few days. But yeah, check that out. That'll be on their socials. And thanks again for having us on. Any final thoughts?
No, I don't think so. My jury service was unsuccessful this week.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Did you go in and you
Went
had to sit in
in.
the box?
No, we went in. Everyone was supposed to report at 8:30. I got there at like 8:10 because I hate being fucking late and just
Yeah.
sitting around. So got there at like 8:10. Went through security and everything. Stood around, and then around 8:20, one of the sheriffs who was doing security was like, "Hey, you guys are good to go home. They settled the case. Bye." So
Nice.
I had mixed feelings. I wouldn't have
Oh,
minded.
really?
Yeah, I wouldn't have minded doing it. Well, my thought was like, I'd like to get in there and see what the case was. If it was like somebody who was obviously guilty and not an interesting case, like I don't want to deal with this shit. But if it was
Right.
like a cool murder case that sounded interesting, like yeah, fuck it, why not? Who cares? So,
Yeah, I could definitely see the beat on that side of things being interesting and worthwhile. But
yeah,
yeah, especially in that region where you're at, I'm sure that kind of thing's pretty far and few between,
yeah,
that you'd actually get past all the stage gates to like, oh yeah, you're gonna be a juror, and it's something like interesting and like, like that you maybe enjoy is not the right word, but um that you would get something
something
out of or be
interesting.
intrigued
Yeah,
by. Yeah.
yeah,
So I imagine like, well, maybe it's different too, because if you lived in a bigger like metro area, like the chances for something interesting rise, but then you're in a pool of fucking way more people, so it's all relative at the end of the day, I guess. But
yeah.
any hoozles. All right. Well, thank you very much, gang, for joining us for this episode, and we'll see you back next week.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.